Yep. Yep.
And my screen.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks very much for the introduction, Greg, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to present to you this evening on the topic. As Greg said there, it was BIM for the RSAS, and I'm going to talk a bit about the history of BIM, but also a bit about how we have implemented BIM for the Rail Systems Alliance. I don't really know the audience here, so I don't know what your knowledge of BIM is. So if I'm talking about subjects that you already know, please bear with me, because maybe later on in the presentation I'll have something that's new to you. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, as Greg mentioned, I started my career as a CAD technician. I have a degree in computer aided design from what used to be Paisley University and is now the University of West of Scotland. I'm also a member of the Institute of Engineering Designers, and with them I'm also a registered CAD manager, and yeah, over 20 years experience in the industry in infrastructure design. The contents of tonight's presentation, I'll start with some legislation and standards, and I'll move on to defining BIM. I'll talk a bit about the digital era, and I will try and explain a bit about BIM. I'll move on to talking about our experiences with BIM and the Rail Systems Alliance, and then we'll end up with some discussion and some questions and answers. So the legislation and standards. This is the bit that's less interesting for some people, but let me just go through some of the points. So in May 2011, the UK government produced the Government Construction Strategy. That was aiming to deal with various studies indicating that the UK was not obtaining full value from public sector construction projects. It was setting out a programme of measures to reduce construction costs by up to 20%. And it stated that the government would require fully collaborative 3D BIM, which includes the digital project and asset information, documentation and data, etc., as a minimum by 2016. In September 2012, the government introduced what they called the government soft landings, and this recognised the maintenance and operational costs of assets far outweighed the capital cost of construction. The GSL recommends that all public sector new build and major refurbishments should implement GSL by 2013 and BIM initiatives by 2016. And it's aiming to align the interests of those who design and construct an asset with those who subsequently use the asset. October 2013, the Scottish Government introduced the review of public sector procurement and construction. That mandates that construction projects or bodies procuring construction projects or supported by or sponsored by the Scottish Government must assess projects above a £2 million value for BIM initiatives and adopt BIM guidance where appropriate from the 6th of April 2017. It also asked that bodies within the scope of the Scottish Financial Manual assess projects under £2 million where appropriate for BIM aspects. And it recommends that any bodies delivering projects that might influence a public sector might also assess for BIM. So BIM in the private sector, it's been widely accepted that within the private sector, as far back as mid-2000s, BIM and digital processes were widely in use. And one of the first mentions of the term BIM as we know it apparently came back in 1988 at one of the Autodesk conferences. And since then, software companies have continually developed and improved their applications for digital design and construction and coordination. And so the private sector has always been at that leading edge with the software and trying to adopt those software applications into the processes. In many respects, though, that private sector was perhaps leading the way, but what's termed as lonely BIM. And lonely BIM means that it was maybe one discipline or maybe one organisation, but not fully collaborative. And so they're missing out on that collaborative approach. The government approach wanted to adopt the collaborative full BIM approach then. It's also recognised that in facilities and asset management sectors, still relatively slow at picking up BIM processes. And that's kind of understandable, because in private sector, you get developers who are not necessarily involved with the maintenance or even interested in the life cycle and operational costs of an asset. They often just build and sell. And public sector asset owners, like, for instance, Network Rail, really need to, and have been, but also need to increase their embracing of BIM and digital to then fully realise the benefits of accessible and accurate information through the life cycle of an asset. Some public sector clients, like NHS, Ministry of Justice, they're already way ahead in this regard and have extremely well-defined information requirements. So, additional points there, the BS 1192, which is regarded as the standards for the original standards for BIM, was first published in 1990. And again, you might be thinking that's well before you heard of the term BIM. It was replaced again by a second edition in 1998, and then third edition, when it was retitled as Collaborative Production of Architectural Engineering and Construction Information, published in December 2007. That really became the comprehensive code of practice for 2D and 3D design. I'm just moving something off my screen so I can read that fully. So between 2008 and 2017, the British Standards Institute released several updates and additional parts to the BS 1192, and those parts covered things like management of information and security and all that sort of stuff. In October 2012, responsibility for the government soft landings, the GSL, and then subsequently the BIM guidance, moved over to what was introduced as the government's BIM task group, and they then took on responsibility for making sure that the industry got up to speed with BIM and guidance, etc. February 2013 saw the introduction of the PAS 1192, and that provides a specification which supported the code of practice in the BS 1192. The PAS 1192 was revised in 2016, and then in 2018, it was announced that the BS and the PAS 1192 would be replaced by the ISO 19650, the international standard for BIM. And the ISO 19650 was formally introduced in January 2019, when the British standard and the PAS were withdrawn. So that's where we are in terms of standards in the industry at the moment. Why is that moving on? There we go. So defining BIM. BIM means different things to different people. And in the industry, that's fine. That's perfectly okay. The term BIM is often known as building information modeling or building information management, but the word BIM should be used as a verb. It's like constructing. So it's not, it doesn't necessarily mean the building of whether it's a station building or a high-rise building or a shopping centre. It's the verb building. And BIM should be considered a driver for change. Perspectives on BIM change vary from person to person throughout the construction industry and the built environment, depending on whether you're in design or construction or cost estimation or project management or maintenance or operation, or even indeed as a customer or an end user of an asset or a building. Your perspective on the information there that's embedded in that asset will change. So what is BIM? Is it building information modeling? Is it better information management? BIM is a collection of processes. It's not really an add-on to traditional processes, and it's not simply another term for 3D modeling, and it's certainly not exclusive to CAD technicians and BIM coordinators or BIM managers. BIM is the integrated information management processes adopted by the whole project team to achieve the project deliverables. And a project information model, a PIM, PIM, is the entire collection of project information, graphical, non-graphical, geometric, and data from a project. BIM is about providing the right people with the right information at the right time and enabling intelligent decisions to deliver the business outcomes. Moving on then to information management on its own, which I just said there is providing the right people with the right information at the right time. The foundations of good information management are based on 4 pillars: people, standards, process, and technology. When we talk about standards, we mean clearly defined information standards that ensure information is captured and managed correctly. When we talk about process, we talk about optimized business processes, ensuring that data is treated correctly and treated like a critical asset and part of the project process. When we talk about technology, we mean the supporting technology that enables our people to capture information, to exploit information, and to deliver the data and information that's required on a project. And over when we get people, we're talking about providing skills, people with the skills necessary to capture and exploit information. Information management touches all parts of a business and a project. So when you talk about information requirements on a project, they're driven by the information requirements of the asset and the information requirements of the organization who will consume that information. Why BIM? Why do we do BIM? Well, BIM is instrumental for unlocking the value from our projects for our clients. BIM, being able to undertake data analysis on our projects is becoming almost like business as usual now. And BIM allows us to unlock unlimited potential for our clients and extract the best value. And that's basically the underlying reasons why we adopt BIM on a project. If we look a bit about traditional delivery versus BIM delivery, we can see, I hope you can see my mouse here, the grey line with the peaks and troughs shows traditionally how information and knowledge of information and handover of information, has peaks and troughs throughout a project period, from briefing right the way through to operation. So there's always a loss of knowledge between each handover and each stage of a project. And what the yellow line here intends to show is that with a BIM approach, the knowledge and the data and the information is steadily increased throughout the life of the delivery of the project. The second graph here shows, and this is quite a well-known graph in the BIM circles around the industry. It shows that this grey dotted line is a traditional sequence of a design project, and you can see that it increases to a peak in the level of effort and cost right at the tail end of a detailed design, and then it tails off. And what BIM intends to try and do, well, actually, if we look at the other parts of it as well, the dark black line shows the ability to impact a project decreases over the period of the delivery, while the cost of the changes increases over that same time. And so what the introducing a BIM approach tries to do is move that curve earlier in the program, so that the high effort and the cost is done at an earlier stage, where the ability to impact the project is higher and the cost is lower. So that's the idea behind BIM there, is trying to achieve. Okay, so moving on to digital era. BIM is an enabler for the digital era, and we've all heard the digital era that we're moving into. This is the whole new digital world, and things are going to move faster, and no normal is the new normal. So we need to consider global megatrends: urbanization, mobility, sustainability, climate change, digitization, globalization. Global megatrends are feeding the UK trends. UK market conditions will continue with limited growth, but our traditional markets are changing fast, and you've heard that change before, disruption, and things are changing fast, and we need to stay on top of those. Macro trends will increase commonality of client and consumer needs. Traditional professional service models will evolve, and they will evolve swiftly. and skill shortages will come in and play, and low productivity will accelerate client innovation. And so we need to stay on top of that. And that's this digital innovation, the digital world that we're moving into, can be supported by BIM initiatives. There are a few realities that come out of this, and no one organisation has all the answers. So it's about collaboration. BIM is about collaboration. Digital world that we're moving into is collaborative approaches to how we do things. Consumer demand will shape the new business models as well. Ecosystems will drive industry solutions, and by ecosystems, we're not necessarily talking about ecology systems. We're talking about similarities between software suppliers and data users and the end users of a system. And organisations might have very bespoke services, and on their own they won't deliver something, but as an ecosystem, 4 or 5 organisations might deliver something which is of much more higher value than the sum of the parts. And obviously digitally enabled solutions will become critical to our value creation. The speed of change is already accelerating, and it's getting faster and faster, and we need to stay on top with that. The digital era we're moving into has a focus on solving the big issues, and the big issues, as we kind of mentioned already: connected cities and mobility, skills and productivity, workspace and asset management, the places that we live and work. That's what that means. It's changing. The digital environment is changing those how we interact with those places, and obviously the socio-economic change. A few quotes here about what the digital revolution. So the digital revolution is changing the whole concept of what we do. The digital revolution is trying to crack a global problem of resource. That's human resource as well as natural resource. The digital environment is trying to combine the technologies that we use to get the best out of what we're trying to do, and also about trying to replace brain power. So it's no longer down to one person and one person's mind to crack a problem, and we can start to use things like automation and digital technologies to deliver better design solutions, automated design solutions, and also to deliver things like transport as a service and automated vehicles, all that kind of thing. Is it the digital environment will influence all of that? So I'm going to try now and explain BIM. Some of you may have seen this before. This is a very well-known image of the BIM wedge from the BS 1192. It was 2008. This was coined by the team Bew and Richards, who worked on the BIM task force. So this diagram shows that at what was termed the levels: level 0, level 1, level 2, and you've probably heard the term BIM level 2. What this tries to describe is that at level 0, BIM maturity was low, and we might have worked in a CAD environment where we had drawings which contained vector data, lines, arcs, text, etc. And we worked in a paper environment. That's pretty much what level 0 was. Level 1 is an enhancement of that, and we work in 2D and 3D. We have the introduction of some standards. We start to use models, and we start to collaborate on our files and start to use some kind of processes and file management. BIM level 2 starts to move into more of past the 3D, but starts to organize their information better. Start to talk about asset information management and things like that. We have much more in the way of object libraries and collaboration. And we start to talk about file-based collaboration and library management. BIM level 3 actually never materialized. It was talked about in industry, and the BIM government task force had aspirations for a BIM level 3, but they kind of changed the terminology from BIM level 3 to BIM Digital Built Britain or something like that. But then the ISO 19650 came along, and levels entirely were replaced. So I just said BIM levels entirely were replaced. You still hear people talk about BIM level 2 all the time, and you continue, I'm sure, to hear about people talking about BIM level 2, and that's fine, I think. But ISO 19650 talks about stages and maturity of information and business layers. So we talk about these standards layers, the ISO 19650 and the national standards and international standards and annexes, etc. We talk about the technology layer and how we might have file and model and containment in a common data environment. And how if we move to a more mature area, we've got an information and container and inquiry-based database. And we can move into the information layers and how we federate our information models, how we structure our data, and how we get the most out of our information increases as we go up through the layers and along through the stages. And we can see then, well, the expectation is that we will get increasing benefit from the information as we get to the highest level and the highest stage. So when we did talk about BIM levels 0, 1, 2, and 3, somebody came up with these fancy graphics, and I think they're still very valid because they describe the process there anyway. So at level 0, we had paper-based, and you're familiar with the sitting in an office, a drawing office, and producing your designs like this, and you hand over the paper or you hand over a zip drive with some files on it. Level 1, we talked about, we delivered object-orientated models. These models are immediately the end user represented the objects that we were designing, a visual representation of them. The models are efficient and they're effective and they're easy to provide documentation from. It was easy in those stages to reuse objects from earlier projects. We started to introduce things like parametric design, and we could start to play with performance analysis on our models within a BIM Level 1 project. And BIM Level 1 then made the next step possible. 2, which actually I think is where a lot of the industry are there or thereabouts with. Some organisations might have a better grasp on some of the aspects than others, but I think most of the industry are at this BIM Level 2 sort of stage about now. BIM Level 2 enables collaboration within the supply chain. BIM Level 2 enables analysis of your models and the aspects of what you design, clash detection, and de-risking projects. BIM Level 2 allows for simulation of construction program and allows visual checks for pinch points and optimized processes. We can also simulate operation and maintenance at that stage as well, based on the information we've got within our models, and again, makes the next step possible. The aspiration for BIM Level 3 was to work intelligently in a sort of open web-based environment where we can access information rapidly, and we can share information, and we can extract the best data from our information models, and we can hand over digital information models as well. It also was to ensure that the knowledge of how things were designed could be carried over to the asset maintainer, and they can reuse that information through the maintenance of the asset. So moving on now to BIM and the Rail Systems Alliance, and the process that I have been through to introduce BIM to the Alliance. From the very start, I knew that we would need to introduce a suite of processes, technologies, and standard documents in order to support what we do in the Alliance. Initially, your post-contract BIM execution plan, you'll all have heard of a BIM execution plan. That's fundamental to what we do. I introduced the Master Information Delivery Plan and the Task Information Delivery Plan. I created Common Data Environment Strategy and the guidance documents that go with that. We created document numbering protocols and guidance, including a volume and location strategy, and I'll talk a bit more about that in detail a bit further on. We obviously have document control procedures, and we had an information delivery plan. Now, information delivery plan was previously known as a model production and delivery table, and it has also been called a designer's responsibility matrix. So it has changed the name quite a few times, but it's something that you'll probably recognise. Again, I'll show that later on. We've got CAD standards which support how we deliver BIM on a project, and actually for the Rail Systems Alliance, the CAD standards are by Network Rail anyway. We have continual rolling series of project briefings, which include common data environment briefings, the CAD clarifications and doc control briefings. In terms of the CAD clarifications, that's the CAD standards, as I said, are by the client, but we have specific clarifications or specific, I wouldn't say deviations, but certainly understanding of how we deliver against those standards. We have QA checklists, including a CAD QA process. And we have regular federated model management and digital coordination processes. In fact, today was one of those for one of the major projects. And on that federated digital coordination process, we have model status reports, we have coordination issues, and we do clash detection and reporting. And we've adopted the use of iTwin digital models within our projects on the Alliance. So the BIM Execution Plan, as I said, I'm sure a lot of you have seen a BIM Execution Plan on your projects in the past. So the BIM Execution Plan sets out project information, the BIM standards, the goals that we expect we want to BIM to achieve on the projects. It sets out what we do for our BIM delivery. It identifies the BIM team and identifies the roles and responsibilities in the BIM team. We talk about the software and the technologies we're going to use to help us deliver that. It sets out the groundwork for our collaboration and communication strategy. We mention how we're going to use the level of detail within our models, and it certainly covers a bit about quality control. The master and task information delivery plans, often termed the MIDIP and TIDIP. So the master information delivery plan is the list of basically the overall deliverables management for a project. It's definitely linked to a project program. It defines deliverable dates and it identifies responsibilities for those deliverables. What you might think of, what a MIDIP might include is something like a specific date and, for example, a Form A and another date and a Form B, and that kind of high level aspects of the program. The task information delivery plan is the breakdown for a task team, and a task team can be, and the term discipline or task team could really be interchangeable there. So for a task team, it would be the actual documents within that deliverable. So for a Form A delivery, you might have a track team, and you might have a civil team, and you might have an electrical team. And so each of those teams then would break down 15 drawings, 5 models, 2 reports, and a risk register or something like that within a TIDIP. It also would be used to plan the effort on a task and how many hours that you might break it down by hours, you might break it down by who is responsible for different things on a different stage of a task. You can use it to plan your document numbering for a task. And it's often used to track the document control. So you would record your revision and your status of your documents as you create them, and then part of that can be used as a transmittal notice, and you often see that done like the old traditional transmittal notice gets replaced by something from a TIDIP. I mentioned that we have a common data environment strategy on the Alliance. So those of you who work on Network Rail projects, you will be familiar with HDMS, and HDMS comes in 2 parts, EB and ProjectWise. HDMS EB is hosted by Network Rail, and HDMS ProjectWise is hosted by Network Rail. The environment that we use for ProjectWise, the Network Rail NR1 environment, is exclusively CAD, and so within the Alliance we needed something else, and we chose Viewpoint 4P, which was hosted by Babcock. So all of our CAD work in progress deliverables in ProjectWise, all of our non-CAD work in progress deliverables in Viewpoint. Also within Viewpoint, we use we can do some other documentation. There is a manual document control transaction between ProjectWise and Viewpoint if it's required, but often what we use is the automated or semi-automated transaction between ProjectWise and EB to move or deliver drawings into the environment for Network Rail review. So as I was saying there, all CAD work in progress carried out in HTMS ProjectWise. All client-facing documentation is uploaded to EB. All non-CAD work in progress is in Viewpoint, and Viewpoint also contains our sort of commercial or project management or SHEC processes as well. Within the CDE, to support the CDE strategy, we produce CDE guidance, and CDE guidance typically would contain things like login support, data hierarchy, site architecture, revisions and statuses. This kind of thing can change project to project, and hence why we have to do it for each project that we work on. And the fact that the Rail Systems Alliance is a framework of projects, we kind of lumped it all together in one. But given that we have ProjectWise and we have Viewpoint, it obviously then meant two different documents. I was actually going to open one up and I forgot to open it, so I won't show you just now, but we have one document for ProjectWise, we have another document for Viewpoint, which are quite extensive documents, but very detailed, and they go through the step-by-step processes that we use within each of those. We didn't create any user guidance for EB, because again, as you may well know, working on Network Rail projects using EB, Network Rail already have plenty of guidance for how to use their facility. Document numbering protocol I mentioned earlier. We developed a document numbering protocol for the Alliance. Now, anyone who's familiar with the BS 1192 or the ISO 19650 will be familiar with the 7-segment document numbering format that is prescribed there. The 7-segment numbering format always starts with a project number, then an originator, then a volume or a system, we've called it because it is a systems alliance, a level or a location, a document type, a discipline, and a sequential number. If you're familiar with Network Rail projects, you will recognise that they have a 5-segment number used in EB and ProjectWise, and the 5-segment number skips out the system or the volume and the level and location, and otherwise they're identical. What we had to do within the Alliance, we were instructed to go with the BS 1192 and the ISO 19650 was to develop the 7-segment numbering format. And what we, from taking the starter from the Network Rail 5-segment number, there was no strategy within Network Rail for a system code or for level and location, and we had to develop that. So that was something that, it was actually a fair amount of work went into that with myself and the Central Alliance and Network Rail's document control community. What we came up with was, for the system codes, based on rail methods of measurement, was adopting the rail methods of measurement codes and condensing it just to 6 characters. And what that intended to provide was some clarity about the volume or the space that a system occupies within a model, or indeed within the built environment that we're working in. So therefore you can see we've got track systems, we've got drainage systems, we've got OLE systems, signalling systems, and structural systems. The information delivery plan I mentioned earlier on, this is the document that has changed name over the period of time, and we introduced this version of the information delivery plan on the Alliance. Interestingly, we find it is more valuable on a larger IUT projects, enhancement style projects, rather than the delivery of our domestic projects. And I think because of the fast-paced delivery of the domestic projects, that the introduction of something like this wasn't of great value. The enhancement projects, it certainly was. I've got already, if I drag that over, got a live version of one of these documents. And what we do in this document is we list the aspects of the design against the grip stages, and who at that particular grip stage has responsibility for that aspect of the design, what the level of detail is required, and the level of information. So for example, at grip 4, let's say we were looking at concrete foundations, level, the SCN, the Alliance, is responsible, and we produce a level of detail 2 or 3 and a level of information 4. And also within this document, it hyperlinks to the NBS toolkit. Hopefully that web link works for me now. And if I bring it over now, I should have opened this before I started. I didn't expect it this long, sorry. Well, that's unfortunate that it's taking so long. Basically, the NBS toolkit does describe with a graphical representation and with the information requirement what it would be required for a level of detail 2 or 3 or 4, or an information level 2, 3, 4. Now, also within the NBS toolkit, there are all sorts of systems that you can investigate. There is some for track, and there is some for overhead line. They're not as maybe well defined as some of the systems, but they certainly are there. I was hoping that came up. Yeah. There we go. For the concrete foundation system, you can see that a level of detail 2 is simply a 2D detail, but a level of detail 3 introduces a 3D model, and a level of detail 4 there's more detail, level of detail 5 even more detail, but more detail also in the plan and the section details that you would develop in your drawings and your design. Also within the level of information, you can see level 4, 5. This is the kind of information that you would expect to see attached to the information within your model. If I go back to that, let's just say we went to ballasted rail track systems, and hope it's not too slow. Ballasted rail track systems, there you go. At a level of detail 1, you would expect to have something like that. A level of detail, introduce a 3D model, and this is the kind of information that you might expect to see in a drawing. We could also move on to the level of information, and it might reference the specifications or the standards that you might refer to, and the kind of information that we expect to see attached to the objects within a model. Unfortunately, the NBS toolkit, the creators of the NBS toolkit reached a stage where the funding stopped from the government. So while there might be something in the region of, I think it's 2200, just under 2100 systems within they're just the systems. There are a few other categories as well. Not all of them have, there is aspirations for them to secure more funding and continue that, but the NBS toolkit on its own is still a very useful tool, and it's one that certainly we will continue to use within the Alliance and within Arcadis, where we can define these responsibilities matrices, and that helps educate the team on the level of details and what the level of detail actually means and what's required. Moving back into the presentation then, and I will be on that page. So I mentioned that we do federated model management and digital coordination. And we do clash detection. We do more of these on our big IUT projects. I think the domestic projects with their fast pace, they do their discipline coordination as they progress, and it works very well for them. But on the larger multi-discipline, multi-organisation IUT projects, a bigger scaled clash detection exercise is often necessary. And you can see here where we've identified a clash, and the clash is between some earthworks and then some trough route. In this case, we've got a clash between some troughing and a retaining wall. And in this image, you can see we've got a clash between a lock case and some drainage. Now, we use a piece of software called Bentley Navigator to do the clash detection, and within Bentley Navigator, we can run these clash detection reports and export the outputs from the clash detection report, and then share that with the team. And that looks a bit like this. And one of our projects that we've got going at the moment is the Carstairs project, and you can see what we've got here is we've got quite a lot of clashes, but you can also see that we've resolved the vast majority of those clashes, and that proves the value of the clash detection exercise. Before you've even reached the construction phase, you've resolved so many of the issues that might have possibly come up during a construction phase. And that goes back to that curve that we showed earlier on, where we've got a high chance of impacting the delivery of a project early on and resolving those issues, and it will hopefully cost less and be easier to construct for the team hitting the site when they do. I also mentioned that we use iTwin digital coordination models, and I do have one of them open on my other screen. So iTwin digital coordination models are a Bentley offering. And within this, you can bring your federated model in, and you don't need to have any software installed. It's a very easy to use, easy to navigate, web-based tool. And within this, with some very basic knowledge of navigation, you can start to look at your model in a 3D environment. You can switch things on and off. You can look at the sort of design that you want to look at. You can use tools within this, like if I just zoom back to the extents there, you can use tools like cross section, and let's say I wanted to stop zooming. Let's say I wanted to cut a cross section across the site at this location. Along one of these strings. Let me choose one that's suitable. Let's try that. It's typical when you try and do a live example. I'll move along slightly. Let's try somewhere like that, perpendicular cross section. And it's not come up again. Well, that's unfortunate. This worked when I tried it earlier on. Yeah, sorry about this, folks. What we should see here is obviously a profile across the site at that location. As I said, this worked for me earlier on. It's typical of a live demonstration that it's decided not to work for me. But the use of these tools has been useful in our IDCs and our pre-IDC meetings, and the team have really seen the benefit of having access to this kind of information, where they can start to discuss clashes, potential clashes, and design issues as they occur. There are other things in here. You can do longitudinal sections along an element, and you can do, as I said, the perpendicular cross sections. You can measure elements, and you can get distances and areas and spatial locations, XYZ coordinates. You can also raise issues. You can raise comments and tag them to an item, and then connect that to a person that's in the group, and the person can respond to those issues as they go. So let me just give it one more chance to create a section. No. Yeah, I'm disappointed in that. I don't know why it's not showing up. But then that actually moves me on to then the last part of the discussion, and I was going to open up for discussion. But first, I was going to say, or ask a question of everybody: is our industry ready for disruption, the digital disruption that we are about to? Well, we are seeing now in the industry. People in the yes camp already recognise that the massive opportunities for change. People in the yes camp might welcome the skills and the capability development that we're already experiencing with digital disruption. And again, they might value the life cycle performance opportunities that we can get out of our digital models and digital information. In the not so sure camp, people might suggest there's a possibility of failure or information overload or paralysis because of too much information or not enough information. You might also be concerned about the low profitability, and that would be a natural concern if you're running a business. And at the moment, there might be low volumes of usable data and excess process, and people are wondering, is that going to change as we go along? So yeah, I want to open it up for questions. If anybody's got any thoughts on that question, is our industry ready for the disruption? But also other questions based on what you've seen in the presentation. And yeah, thanks for your patience and your while you were listening to my presentation there. Greg?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I've just got a few questions from me first, and I'll hopefully give people a chance to maybe type some in on the screen, and then if not, we can open up all the mics in a minute or two, and we'll hear what everyone's got to say. I was just a few simple ones from me, really. So, way back at the start, you mentioned you were describing the definition of BIM or what it stood for. So is it which is it then? It seemed to be kind of information modeling or sometimes information management. What kind of one, or is it both really?
It's both.
Yeah. Okay.
There was an early misconception that BIM was about modeling and BIM was all about Revit. BIM was all about a CAD process, and it's not. BIM is information management. And it's in its purest form. It's about all of the information on a project, or all of the information about an asset that we generate from early concept design right the way through to how the asset is used in operation through the whole life cycle of the asset. And you mentioned earlier on that one of the projects I'm working on is with the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, and they have obviously some very, very old assets, and we might be retrospectively fitting digital information for those assets, because as you can imagine, back in the Victorian era, they didn't even have CAD drawings. So we're retrospectively creating the CAD models so they can then do the renovations. But then those CAD models will become their asset model when that's in operation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and a second one for me, just really, what do you think, in your opinion, is a sort of realistic time of getting through all the BIM levels, or does that depend on the level your client operates at, or your needs, kind of thing?
So as I said earlier on, and the industry has kind of stopped. Well, the standards have stopped using the terms BIM level 1, BIM level 2, and we talk about maturity. And so there are different clients have different levels of maturity, and delivery organisations have different levels of maturity. And as I also mentioned earlier on, the facilities management companies have different levels of maturity as well. And so you can deliver BIM on a project at any level of maturity, and that maturity might be quite low for some organisations, but as long as you're starting on that journey, and you will make progress on every project, and so there's no starting off at a big up, and quickly you will find project to project that your maturity increases, and there's a point in time where you might, as an organisation, say it's time to engage somebody like Lloyd's for auditing and for assessment of your BIM maturity, and that's fine as well. And some of the larger organisations in the design arena might already have those qualifications and can use that in their bids and all that sort of stuff as support of as recommendation of their own maturity. But that doesn't mean that small, medium-sized enterprises can't start off at a base level and work up to that kind of maturity as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, it was good to see when you were talking about the TIDIP. It's funny, I was trying to use that just the other day for estimating purposes, and I still don't think it's granular enough. Just my observation, but because it's TIDIP's mainly the documents produced, but there can be a lot of activities going on behind the scenes to lead to that document. So I was still having to drill down a level more, but it's certainly got a lot of benefits aside from that as well, and I'm sure we can figure out a way to sort of sum it up.
I think you might see the activities that go along with producing the documents is perhaps captured in your program.
Definitely was. Yeah.
So it may be a combination of the two that you need to use.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm now going to I'll open up everyone's mics if anyone has any questions, and bearing in mind the questions posed by Chris there in his final slide.
Unmuted.
Hopefully that's everyone unmuted. Hopefully.
Hi there, Greg and Chris.
Hello.
It's Jim Watson jumping in, and I've got to jump in your last slide because you're asking the question: the yes camp or the no camp.
Well, Sally, don't pigeonhole yourself in a camp. Just opening it up for, what do you think of the industry you work in?
I think I'm very, very painfully sitting on the fence because I can see the huge benefits that BIM brings. But at the back of my mind, it's the confidence in the data that has gone into the system to produce the BIM model. I say, clearly, I've had bad experiences in the past. I say, I can see this, great, it's the way forward. But how do we get the confidence? And that's why I'm sitting in the fence, is that I don't quite have the confidence on the data that's being inputted.
So I think in response to that, I might agree. I might say I agree.
Muted.
Sorry, I heard myself get muted there. I would agree with some of that in that data is sketchy at best in a lot of our projects. When you consider things like subsurface utilities and historic data like that, we might have some information that we use. But if we use in the skills and we invest in the capabilities and the development of our people and the technologies that we use, we can start to guarantee the information we produce, and we can start to get more confidence in that. And and how we define what information is required as well. So clients to come along on that journey and
Unmuted.
involve their facilities management or their maintenance to say, we need this information and we're going to use this information in the future. Otherwise, the design team we can create any information we want, but it might use full information. We need that advice from the client and from the maintenance teams or the facilities management teams so that we create the right information in the right format for the right people to use further down the line.
Right.
That kind of
yeah.
give you any more confidence?
Again, you say is rubbish in, rubbish out, but the concept is absolutely brilliant. I'm working in a project down south, a very complex project, and we have a model, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful what you can see on it, but you've always got this wee niggling doubt in the back of your mind. Is that actually right? But can I be cheeky? Can I ask another question here or raise another point?
Go ahead.
You come up with a design responsibility matrix, and at the brief look we had in the screen, it was network rail, network rail, network rail. How does that responsibility matrix align with NR L2 RSC 2009, where, to my mind, the person that is accountable and responsible for everything is the contractor's engineering manager?
If I bring it back over to the screen, so and this is in terms of the Rail Systems Alliance. At GRIP 1, we've got Network Rail responsible for information. At GRIP 2, we've got Network Rail responsible for information. At GRIP 3, we've started, it's the Rail Systems Alliance team that's responsible. And as you move forward, you know, it stays with the Rail Systems Alliance up to GRIP 7, and then project closeout, the information is a responsible party is Network Rail again. Now, this type of document will change for other projects. Now, I have this similar document for the Botanic Gardens, for example, and in that we have the REBA stages, the REBA stages of work, which again is 8 stages, so that it makes sense that it's similar in that way. But you would have different suppliers at different stages. You might have at a REBA stage 4 or at REBA stage 3, you'll have a design house. At REBA stage 4, you might have joint responsibility between the designer and the contractor. At REBA stage 6, you certainly be the contractor that's responsible for the information. And then as you hand over to an operation, it becomes the facilities management team.
Okay, so
you would
fairly,
change this document.
It's a fairly high level split that's been done here, rather than drilling down to the individual. It's organisation rather than individual. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So you might, if you had many different suppliers on a project, you could split it between an electrical designer and an overhead line designer and a mechanical designer or something like that if you wanted to. And then your responsibility matrix could become a lot more fleshed out. But in terms of the Rail Systems Alliance, it made sense for us to keep it to these ones initially.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Right.
Any other questions for Chris? I've had a bit of trouble unmuting everyone, but I should have done it now. I should all be on my screen. Shows everyone is unmuted by me, so you should feel free to ask any question.
Greg,
Yeah.
hi, it's Russell. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yes.
Aye, sorry, I just managed to unmute myself eventually. So thanks. Thanks for the presentation. That was great. There was one question I have just about something you said at the beginning about the ability to be able to model operations and maintenance, and I was just trying to really see what that involves, what that means. You know, what type of detail you would get out of that, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, sure. So what BIM aspirations are for operations and maintenance is that embedded within a model, you might have a schedule for refurbishment or a schedule for replacement on some aspects. Now, when it comes to, for example, the Rail Systems Alliance, when we talk about rail, the maintenance schedule for rails, this is still very much in its infancy, the idea of putting this information into a digital model. But when you talk about a building, for example, and then I said earlier on in the presentation that clients or public sector clients such as National Health Service and the Department of Justice have very, very well defined information agreements. They specify the information that they want out of their model so that they end up with a digital facilities management model. And the digital facilities management model gives them advance notice of when they expect aspects of the model, aspects of the building to reach the end of life. And so they can program their maintenance from the digital model. They can start to pre-order new parts before they reach the stage of failure. And, you know, facilities management in a lot of industry has been all about operate to failure and then replace. And that then might introduce a time of a period of wait while you order parts and all that sort of stuff. And that's where the BIM model, the asset information model, not the BIM model, the AIM. If you're operating an AIM, then the model should be able to preempt when you need to order parts and for maintenance, or might be able to pre-warn you when a new contractor is going to have to be brought in to do a specific part of maintenance. Longer term, the bigger picture, the Internet of Things, the hope is that we will have fully connected reality and models, so that the model will be able to perhaps the model itself might automatically adjust the environment or the conditions within a building, so air conditioning on and off or other things like that, and so we become a fully automated environment that we live in and operate in, and that's the aspirations there to use that kind of technology. I think we're a long way from that, but yeah, there's certainly aspirations within NHS and with the Department of Justice where they're already using technologies for predictive maintenance, etc.
Sure, thanks, Chris. Yeah, absolutely, and it sounds like I mean, we have some variations of remote monitoring within the railway just now, and if that was able to speak to the BIM system of that, you could predict it. It sounds like a good tool to have. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Chris. Cheers.
Thanks.
Okay, any further questions for Chris? Last call. Okay, I'll give it another minute. If I could, Chris, I'm just going to change the screen to mine and to look at the last remaining items on the agenda and see if there's any last questions. Okay, should be that screen there. Okay, if there's no further questions, thanks very much for an excellent presentation. It was really, really interesting topic, and it was really good to hear you right back to the start. And you stated that standards on BIM went far back as 1990. So That was quite a surprise to a lot of people, I think. It was good to hear the actual definition of BIM that we discussed at the end as well. And I think you absolutely, you nailed the main questions people generally have about BIM, like what does it stand for, what is, and why have BIM, what benefits. I really like the graphics you showed, Blaine, like the graph with the BIM approach versus the traditional approach, and how it shows that BIM will help influence a project earlier in its life cycle, and the link to the cost in that element as well. Other things like the BIM wedge and some of the other graphics some of us have seen before, but they are really good in helping to show all levels of BIM. And I think some people and some companies as well like to boast about what level they are on or what they think they're on, without maybe realising what the BIM levels they're talking about actually entail. And you've explained how the new ISO standard now refers to them as stages as well, rather than the levels. You then moved on to the particular Rail Systems Alliance approach to BIM, and there's quite an impressive list of strategies and procedures you've implemented there. Good to explain that 7-segment number format and how we have to sort of condense that for EB into the 5-segment as well. And as an engineer in the Alliance, the class detection functionality and things like iTwin, have really been great, and there'll be a massive benefit for us in IDCs, for example, going forward. It's a shame your iTwin demo didn't quite work out as planned, but as they always say in TV, never work with animals, kids, or Bentley iTwin, don't they? So
yeah, I've just opened up another one of them, Greg, and I've got exactly the same problem, and I'm steam coming out of my ears here. As soon as I finish this presentation, it'll work. Certainly will.
No doubt. So it's certainly a vast topic, Chris, and I'm sure you've only scratched the surface in some areas for us. So I'll just close at that and just say thanks again for an excellent presentation. And normally for face-to-face we'd give a round of applause, so I don't know if anyone can do that through the computer or not. But thanks for everyone for your presentation.
Thanks for letting me give me the opportunity, Greg. I appreciate that.
No, not at all. Much appreciated. Before everyone disappears, just one of our last items there was a reminder of the upcoming section meeting. So looking at Edinburgh section meeting there, we have 5th of May. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, SWICS, Predictive Maintenance at Switches and Crossings, by Paul Finney and John Edgley. And the next Glasgow section meeting will be the Wednesday, 19th of May, and it's about Ready Power 21st Century Plant by Andy McLaren. So something to look forward to. I think that's the end, really, of our formal meeting. I'll probably hit recording, but you can see the last agenda item there if we're